What is up, my Squirtleites? It is I, your king, welcoming you back to Destiny. In this video, I want to talk about my hopes for the weapon and class balances that I'm hoping we'll see on the stream this Wednesday, and if not, in the patch notes for the upcoming April update. There are a lot of things that need doing. However, I do believe that the current weapon balance is in the best place we've seen thus far. But of course, there are still some tweaks that need to be made that I would like to talk about. So let's talk about weapons first. First up, let's talk about the hand cannons, okay? Accuracy, feel, and ammo capacity, all of these things need to be brought up. The accuracy on hand cannons at the moment is abysmal. They feel very clunky in your hands. It's just not that great at all, and their ammo is just too darn low. What I don't understand is that they nerfed the ammo capacity on hand cannons. However, none of this affected any of the exotic hand cannons, so really the only ones that got hit were the legendaries, which weren't overpowered to begin with. So really, there is a lot that needs to be changed with hand cannons. They are in a bad spot, specifically the legendary types. However, there are two exotic hand cannons that are ruling the Crucible at the moment, and that would be Thorn and Last Word. How are we supposed to fix those, you ask? Well, Last Word, I really think the range fall-off needs to be brought up a lot closer. Okay, I also think that the body damage, not the head damage should stay the same, but the body damage should be nerfed so that it should only be able to 5-shot to the body, at least when aiming down sights, maybe still 4-shot when firing from the hip, but it should be a lot less to the body, considering how that gun really doesn't require any skill if all you're doing is aiming from the body, and you still have the highest time to kill anyway. Thorn should only in PvP lower shields. I think it is fine in PvE. I've taken it into old Year 1 strikes, and I absolutely love using Thorn in PvE, but in PvP, it really needs a fix. It really does. It should only be able to burn down to the shields, and after that, burn damage should not have an effect any longer. Maybe should keep you from recovering, but you shouldn't burn out and die that way. That's just not what Thorn should be able to do. I think that's a little bit overpowered, and it definitely shouldn't be able to 3-shot to the body. Next is pulse rifles, and I think mid and high impacts need a little bit of a buff. High impacts need enough of a buff so that you don't have to land every single shot on the head to 2-tap. I think you should be able to, maybe on the Hawkeyes land 3 out of 4 on the head to 2-tap, and then on the other, maybe on the other types, you should have to land them all. But I think the head damage should just be brought up maybe 1 or 2 ticks. But what needs it even more are the mid-impact pulse rifles. They need to be brought up a little bit more so that they're not really in the exact same place as the low-impact pulse rifles, but firing much slower. They just need a tiny buff. Maybe make it so that if they land all headshots on a lower mid-armor target, it's still a 2-shot. Scout rifles are in a perfectly fine place. I have no problems with them whatsoever in PvE or PvP. I absolutely love them. Of all variants, they're great. They do fine. Auto rifles need a lot of help. I think that the low-impact auto rifles need a slight range nerf, but I don't really think that's of the greatest importance. What is of the greatest importance are mid and high-impact auto rifles. Mid-impact needs a tiny buff. They are right on the cusp of being usable. They are so close, especially auto rifles like Hardlight and Monte Carlo. So darn close to their low-impact brothers, but they just need that tiny buff to get there. High-impact auto rifles, on the other hand, I feel like need just as much help as legendary hand cannons do. I have a God Roll high-impact, an answering cord with Feeding Frenzy, amazing range, and even more amazing stability. It is a beautiful auto rifle, and it makes me so sad that I can't even use this thing in the Crucible because it just doesn't kill things. It just doesn't. They need a very large buff to bring them in line with their other auto rifles. Please, Bungie, make this happen. Fusion rifles, we're moving on to special weapons. Fusion rifles need a few things. They need increased accuracy and increased PvE damage output. But as far as increased accuracy goes, what I think they need to do is I think they need to make them hit scan. They should not have travel time. However, I think range damage fall off needs to be applied a lot sooner. They need to have kind of the same fall off as I would say the Last Word. I think they should be around in the same area where the last word is at the moment in terms of range fall off, so that you can't cross map people, but you can kill them outside of shotgun range. That would be ideal. They definitely need a huge buff in PvE so that they're actually a lot more viable. I would say just crank them up. Crank them up. Give them like a 150%, 175% damage buff in PvE, and that way they'll be a lot more usable. Shotguns just need a PvE damage increase. Otherwise, they are fine. Bring them a little bit closer to what they were in House of Wolves. Just make them a little bit stronger in PvE so that they're a lot more fun to use. I don't really think they need a huge increase like fusion rifles do. I think maybe just 125, 130% would be enough from what they're at now. But they still need a little bit of an increase just to make them a little bit more viable. Snipers. There are two things I want with them. One is actually kind of a buff, but the other is a nerf. When aiming down sights, if you are shot in the head, you should descope. That is what should happen with sniping. You should automatically descope as soon as you are shot in the head. With anything, I would say anything that does more than 40 to the head in PvP should descope you. PvE, no. Keep them the way they are. But for PvP, if you take more than 40 damage to the head, you should automatically descope. It should work much like staggering. Same thing, okay? However, all snipers should be allowed to res snipe. And this kind of goes more in line with the Sandbox. But I think that the player that is being revived should not get an overshield because you should not be given a reward for dying. You shouldn't be given a reward for that. So I think all snipers, low or high impact, should be allowed to res snipe the person being revived. The person doing the reviving, however, you still need that high impact to kill them because they still deserve that overshield for putting themselves in the line of fire. On to heavy weapons. Rocket launchers need a small PvE damage buff, in my opinion. I think that just applies on the initial blast, however. Legendary rocket launchers are absolutely useless in PvE, so I think it would be nice if they got a small increase in damage. Machine guns are fine. I don't think anything needs to be changed with those. Now let's move on to the class balancing. Alright, so let's start off with the Warlocks, okay. All three of the subclasses need a little bit fixing. I think Nothing Manacles needs to be brought back to the way it was. I have no idea why Bungie nerfed that in the first place, because now they don't do anything at all, which is really a shame. Aside from give you a second's charge, but they do not home in. I don't care what anyone says, they do not. They are effectively useless exotics at the moment. And then I also think that the Ahamkara's Skull needs a little bit of a buff as far as the energy drain is concerned. These have a potential of actually being incredibly useful exotics, or of being an incredibly useful exotic, but the energy drain effect just isn't really all that noticeable. I think if they could buff that a little bit more, this could be a pretty darn awesome exotic that people would be using a lot more once they learned how to tool around with it and mess with their perk set. And you could have grenades like crazy. Sunsingers, oh boy, Sunsingers really just need one massive fix, and that is with their burn damage. I think their burn damage should not only be decreased, but also the Viking funeral time should be cut down dramatically. I think the Viking funeral time should only double, because I think it's, 3 ticks with Touch of Flame, and then Viking funeral would just make that 6 ticks. I think that is a very fair thing to do. Otherwise, you're only taking a total of like 120 something damage from a firebolt grenade even after the burn has depleted. I think that's a little bit more fair, and it doesn't put you out of the match as long. It's also not a huge nerf either, but it can be still useful on the Sunsingers end. Stormcallers only need one thing, and they need their Transcendence timer decreased by, let's go with 5 seconds. I think that's enough. Transcendence lasts so darn long, and it really is a little bit overpowered, and it's also really the only time Stormcallers are OP. I think after we fix Transcendence, we can look at Stormcallers' neutral game a little more. Like maybe buffing Arc Web a little bit, because it doesn't really do all that much. But when it does, it can be useful. But otherwise, Stormcallers are super overpowered in their super, but their neutral game's terrible. So I think, after we fix Transcendence, we can kind of work on their neutral game. But as of right now, I can't really see what needs to be done, because it's really just all centered around Transcendence. On to Titans. I think As far as the full class goes, they just need their melee hit detection fixed. That's really it. The only other fix is for Sunbreakers, and that is the hammers. They need slightly better tracking and or slightly better grenades and horseshoes effect. They need to be able to detonate and actually kill things upon pre-detonation. That is the most infuriating thing, when you chuck a hammer and it pre-detonates but still doesn't kill the thing that it pre-detonated on. That is really, really annoying and should never happen. So they definitely do need to be fixed a little bit. Right now, Solar Charge is really the only thing worth using on Sunbreakers when you have your super out. Hunters need a few things fixed. They need their melee hit detection fixed alongside Titans. They both have those problems. I would say Titans have it a little worse, but I still have that problem with Hunters, especially with Blink Strike. Gunslingers really are actually in a great place. The only thing I could maybe ask for is get rid of the Circle of Life perk, because it is just so darn useless. Give them a little bit more of a viable perk option alongside the other two. I think that would be nice. But that's really just a nitpicky thing. They don't really have to do that. I think it would just be nice if they got rid of that, because it's just so useless. No one uses it. And then also Acleophage Symbiote. Just bring that thing back up. I mean, maybe not to the full timer that it originally had, but maybe only decrease it by a second or two. Like, I think that would be a lot better, because it's just impossible to use. Really, the best you can ask for is to get 3 shots off in the timer that it gives you, because Acleophage Symbiote, man, it is just not what it once was. Blade Dancers need a couple things. They need their hit detection on Arcblade fixed dramatically. It is so annoying when you know that 80% of your swings aren't even going to kill if you hit somebody. That is the most annoying thing of all time. The tracking on skip grenades needs a little bit of a decrease. They're kind of a little bit overpowered. I think their tracking should be just as strong as, let's say, Axion bolts, because these skip grenades follow you a lot longer than those do. However, the other arc grenades, arc bolts, need a little bit of a buff on their area of effect. They need to be kind of in line with fire bolts, I think, and they should also hit from above, much like fire bolts do. Night Stalkers. Prevent additional inputs during Shade Step. Just don't allow them to open up anything during Shade Step. Switch weapons, bring up their ghost, none of that. That'll fix the glitch right there. They shouldn't be able to do anything mid-Shade Step. Once you've done your Shade Step, you've committed to your Shade Step, and you should be stuck in it. I think that's a very fair thing to ask for. And then also, their Shadow Shot should activate upon contact with the target. Okay? It's really, really stupid that you fire when you have Quiver out and you fire at someone with a super, you shoot them directly. It does damage to them, but then they can just walk right out of its area of effect, and it doesn't even take away their super. That is kind of stupid. It should be either a kill on hit, or it should at least deactivate their super instantly on hit. And then the only other thing that I could ask for in the Sandbox update, that's really kind of a big thing that I really wish they'd change, is get rid of 3 of coins. I know that's not a popular thing to ask for, but 3 of coins have really ruined what has made exotics such a good thing in this game. Now pretty much everybody has them all, so it's really not that all that exciting. Being somebody who was a PlayStation player exclusively through all of year 1, but never got Hawkmoon until the Taken King drop, I know how that feels. I really know what it feels like to suddenly finally get that exotic you want. It's an exciting thing. I mean, I finally got Suros Regime for the first time after going unbroken in a skirmish match. I mean, it's an exciting thing to finally get that to drop. I really think they need to remove 3 of coins as a result, bring them back as the end game rewards in Crucible to balance that out a little bit. But again, they just need to go. They really, really do. But yep, that's all of my thoughts and hopes for in the weapon class balancing and sandbox balancing update coming on Wednesday that they're going to talk about in a Twitch stream. I really hope that those things get addressed. Some are more important than others, but of course, when it comes to hand cannons, high impact auto rifles, sun singers, and actually I would say nothing manacles are just as important. Some of those things absolutely need to be fixed. Okay, that is going to be it for me. Thank you all so very much for watching, and I will see you all in the next one.